Hey, Chuck from Advanced Peer Services here today with Sam D. We're going to talk to you guys about what it is, what's taking place in the peer support community, which is people confusing their roles and having one agenda, not allowing multiple pathways, bringing biases in to rob struggling individuals of multiple pathways to recovery. And we see a lot of people, they have a lot of peers have their credentialing and they have the recovery program, and they mix the two up, and they try to impose their recovery program on the struggling individual and these clients. And we're here to talk today about how we're able to remove those biases, or remove ourselves from the situation that involves the biases. And with that today, Sam, what do you have on that?
Well, thanks, Chuck, for inviting me to be here. Talking on the subject of having a bias or a discrimination against some certain activity or behavior from an individual, first you have to recognize it. You have to be able to recognize the fact that there's things going on for you personally, and we're not all going to be involved in every part of someone's recovery, but definitely having an open mind and being able to offer different pathways is kind of the goal for us here. We want to make sure that the individual is being heard, and that we're not just talking about the positive parts of a certain pathway to recovery, but mostly working through a good person-centered plan so that you can identify the tools and the weaknesses and the strengths of the client so that they can move forward on their own independence, rather than us making it our ideas on how to fix somebody.
So we actually work off of tailoring their recovery plan around their vision, their version of recovery, and try to support them in those goals.
Most definitely. Abstinent for a long time was what recovery looked like. In the reality of being in the community that we are, and me being in recovery myself, I can't just put abstinence on the table as if my whole life is going to be completely just changed because I choose not to interact in certain activities. In reality, I have to be able to have the tools to stay strong enough in certain situations to say no, or to choose whether or not it's a benefit to my goal, to the goal that I'm trying to reach.
So when you have a member come to you, or a client that's coming to you struggling, and obviously if you're working with them, you already relate to the person, and they're looking for similar experiences that you had, and you're able to express those experiences. When they present you with a recovery plan that isn't how yours went, how do you answer to the MAT question, to the Suboxone, the whole abstinence? We have a type of recovery that is believed to be absolutely 100% drug free. And I feel like as peers, we work from a harm reduction standpoint. We
Most
can agree with
definitely.
that. And when you come in with these biases and believe that do you feel like you're robbing someone that is struggling from the chance to have a degree of sobriety, if you were to say methadone didn't work for me, or let me rephrase that. When people start saying methadone won't work for you, I wouldn't do that, or anything else. It feels like you're robbing the person of the chance to at least start taking steps in the right direction. Do you
Most
agree with that?
definitely. I feel on the topic of MATs, it's very sensitive because it's a new procedure we're trying to implement. It used to be an all or nothing kind of thing throughout the recovery community, and if you weren't completely abstinent, you weren't really recognized as sober. And we found that has so much more harm for the client itself, that we are setting them up for failure. We're setting them up for not to be able to have a realistic lifestyle after they've realized that they needed some sort of support to move forward in their lifestyle choice making. I feel that, me personally, MATs is a doctor prescription, and I feel that following a prescription by the guidelines and under doctor's care, that is left to those professionals. I feel like in the peer field, we can be educated on certain experiences we've been through or medication that we have been on, but we have to take that bias out of it. Just because it didn't work for me or it did work for me doesn't mean that your curiosity in what it might look like for you should not stop at my opinion. It should always have an open door kind of situation where if you have questions as a client about what this looks like, I'm gonna give you a recommendation to talk to a physician. If you wanted my experience on how I went through some of my MATs or whatever I used to help me get to the point where I am today, I can offer some of those stories, but honestly, I don't want to curve the opinion of the client. The curiosity is what I want them to venture out and look into, because it doesn't have to be one way or the other. It's multiple ways to get to where you need to be with support that's healthy.
So what do we do when we see peers that are pushing a one recovery agenda in a person-centered plan setting?
As an employee standpoint,
yes,
or as a peer talking to another peer?
Peer talking to another peer.
I would probably address it more as a conversation starter with more of, I know it's worked for you, I know you might like it that way, but we have to look at it more of an open book thing, because we have to make sure the client's not looking at it as, I envy this person as a role model, I want their lifestyle, so I'm gonna do everything they did. That's not what we're trying to open up as a peer. What we wanna open up is making sure that they're the center of the choice making. They're independent in that. We're only here to coach them through that, so we have to make sure that the peer is taking their bias out of it, and if they can't, then we're gonna have to juggle around and either re-educate or retrain so that we can see where their weakness is with that.
Do you think there should be as far as a professional practice where when we see a peer and we've addressed it with the peer, do you believe that there's some type of professional duty to warn, at least as far up as to the supervisor, when you see a peer making someone's recovery program theirs? Does that make sense?
You mean blurring the lines of more of taking responsibility for the client's activities rather than letting them be independent?
No, I mean as far as them solely relying on what worked for them is the only thing that could work for the struggling person served.
How would I address the employee on that storm?
Yes. Do you believe there's a form of duty to warn when you see these behaviors happening in that work?
Yes, because it's very sensitive.
Okay.
It's a very sensitive thing. If you keep it closed-minded, you're not gonna be able to be open enough for the client to explore what they need to so they can build their own plan.
So what does that look like? I know what it looks like where I'm employed, and you probably have your version of where you're employed, but at the end of the day, to me, for myself, when I see these things and I address the person one-on-one and keep it on a peer level, I try to help them correct their action if it needs correcting, if they feel like they're in the wrong, but if they don't, which is a lot of time, and I'm not a hall monitor.
Mm-hmm.
But when I see you about to do damage because someone is exhibiting signs of wanting to recover, but not in the way you went through, exactly the way you went through your recovery, and they still press and press that this is the only way at that point, for me, what I do is I report to my immediate supervisor. I don't go above, I don't go below.
Mm-hmm.
But and when I do report it, I report it with the individual with me.
Mm-hmm.
Is this how this works across, at least where you are?
There's a few different ways that procedure can follow through. From my experience, when there's a peer that is on my level and I either am educated on things or I take them in and absorb them and actually comprehend what the code of ethics is or whatever the policy and procedure is, I feel that the best peer services I've seen myself is double peer, meaning me and a co-partner always trying to head on whatever the situation is, so there's more than one view, and it's not so much as a closed-minded view. So say I was with my peer, my co-partner could be there. If I'm pushing one agenda and it's my recovery agenda, it will be able to be either like red flagged for my partner or my co-partner to be able to address and be able to redirect me to make sure it's centered around the client. And that's the way it's worked best for me. But in other settings, I've also seen it where it's gone blinded. Like they don't really address it, they just continue and assume it fix itself. And in those scenarios, I found that there is a lot of harm to the client.
Would you say, just stopping right there, Would you say that it's, if the peer kind of falls in line with the policy of a company, which would be a traditional abstinence, clinic or recovery model, do you believe it's high level sponsoring at that point, or peer supporting?
I feel when there is a stigma or a bias or an agenda pushed other than the person-centered planning, it turns into more of a, I would say, like a roundabout of what a sponsor does. Because that is mostly ran off morals, not ethics, and when it comes to ethics, you have to make sure you have those boundaries and borders to save the client's vulnerability.
It's Tim, we have these guidelines and rules in place that we follow as peers to empower
Yes.
the client and
Not power rob, and
exactly right.
those roles shift so dynamically that you have to be very, very aware when you're with a client, because you might be secure in your situation and your recovery and whatever that recipe looks like, but if you're closing your mind off to that's the only way it'll work for you because that's the only way it worked for me, that is nothing but harm. And that is needed to be addressed, even if it has to go up the level. And it doesn't have to be extensive to whatever the consequence is, but more of redirection of re-education. Whether it's training or staffings or just making sure that the client is not being harmed by the agenda being pushed of one certain way and not the other.
So would you feel comfortable ending this with nobody's agenda is as important as the struggling individual's beliefs?
I agree. As distorted as a client's belief can be, we are there to coach and guide, not implement what our intentions are.
We're kind of there to say, okay then, let's try it this way.
Yes.
And see if, and bring them to us in what worked for us.
Yeah.
By allowing them to have what their version of recovery looks like to them.
Making them feel safe enough to be honest with where they're going and realistic goals, not something that they can't reach. Like, I'm gonna quit my heroin use today and I'm not gonna set up an appointment so that I can be seen by a physician and make sure my health is okay so that I can do the next steps of things.
But it becomes a really tricky thing to, and it will end like this, it's hard for some people to come into work and work on a person-centered planning and multiple pathways to recovery approach. And in peer support, there is no room for the bias. You have to shake the bias off. If you can't shake the bias off, then find something more suited for your message. We're all here to carry a message, and our message is of hope and inspiration and possibility of, I've been in the same shoes as you. You don't have to do it just like me, but here I am doing it the way I've done it.
Right.
And it's an extended version of sobriety, and it really shows someone that, especially in this field with reentry, you have the prison population, you have the drug addicted, the substance abuse population. We are all interconnected. We all know people. And when they see us, and they see us in the place when we were laying next to them, detoxing, or laying next to them in our prison cells, getting ready to go to our prospective yards, or being on the yard, and coming out and being on the street, being in halfway houses, and being on parole with each other, and for them to see you come out again and see that,
Something different.
this happened to them, and it gives them the hope that it could happen for them as well. It doesn't have to be my way that they get there, though.
Yeah, I feel like from the community that we're trying to reach that there's such a stigma already on itself about reentry recovery and resilience itself, because it's always been this one way, and if you can't get it right this way, we're gonna throw you into consequences or kind of lock you down to the point where you're gonna need some sort of medical attention. And I feel like we're opening the door where we can make it safe enough for people to be honest and not set themselves up for failure.
And that's exactly what our intentions are, and exactly what we're supposed to be doing. And with that, I appreciate you and look forward to more episodes with you to get the perspective of people that are actually working day to day in the field, haven't been sitting at home, haven't been doing. We're actually out there. We're actually doing stuff. We're actually making a difference. And again, if you to come in and know every single day that you can inspire hope to somebody that there is another way than they have been taught before, or that there's another way, there's always another way to get to the point that we are at.
Yeah.
And to me, thank you, Sam, and I appreciate you here at Advanced Peer Services, and thank you.
Thank you so much. Have a great afternoon.